What would you do if the person you loved most confessed a betrayal so casually it shattered your world? David stood frozen in the kitchen, the clink of his coffee mug against the counter the only sound breaking the silence. Emily, his fiancée of 3 years, leaned against the fridge, her arms crossed, her expression almost bored. "Relax, David, it's not a big deal," she'd said, her voice light, as if she'd just admitted to forgetting his dry cleaning. 3 men. Her bachelorette party. One night. The words spun in his head like a carousel he couldn't stop. He'd always thought love was a fortress, unyielding and safe. Now, it felt like a house of cards, trembling in the wind. David and Emily had met in college, 2 dreamers in a sea of cynics. He was studying architecture, sketching buildings that reached for the stars. She was a literature major, her nose always in a book, quoting poetry that made his heart ache. Their love was a slow burn, built on late-night talks, shared dreams, and promises whispered under starlit skies. When he proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, her yes felt like the universe aligning. The wedding was 2 weeks away, their future a canvas of hope until last night, when she came home from her bachelorette party, her laughter too loud, her eyes too bright, and dropped the confession that changed everything. The morning after, David couldn't look at her. He left the apartment, his feet carrying him to the city's edge, where the streets grew narrow and the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked concrete. He needed to think, to breathe, to make sense of the impossible. How could she think it wasn't a big deal? How could she stand there, her voice so calm, while his heart splintered? He wandered into a small diner, the kind with cracked vinyl seats and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. He ordered a coffee he didn't drink and stared at the steam rising from the cup, searching for answers it couldn't give. That's when he met Clara. She slid into the booth across from him, uninvited, her silver hair tied in a loose bun, her eyes sharp despite the lines etched around them. "You look like a man carrying the weight of the world," she said, her voice warm but direct. David didn't know why he talked to her. Maybe it was the loneliness, maybe it was her kind gaze, but the words spilled out. He told her about Emily, about the bachelorette party, about the casual betrayal that felt like a knife. Clara listened, her hands folded around her own coffee mug, nodding as if she'd heard this story 1,000 times. "You know," Clara said when he finished, "I was married once. 50 years. My husband, Tom, had an affair early on. I found out the day after our first anniversary." David's eyes widened, but she waved a hand, dismissing his shock. "I was furious, ready to walk away. But then he told me something I didn't expect. He was scared. Scared of being a husband, of failing me. It didn't excuse it, but it made me see him as human, not a monster." David frowned, unsure why she was telling him this. "Did you forgive him?" he asked. Clara smiled, a mix of sadness and strength. "Not right away. But I chose to try, because I loved him. And he spent every day after proving he was worth it." David left the diner with Clara's words echoing in his mind. He didn't know if he could forgive Emily, but the story stirred something in him, a flicker of hope, or maybe just a need to understand. He returned home, where Emily was waiting, her eyes red from crying. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, not defiant. "I messed up, David," she said, her voice breaking. "I was drunk, and I felt trapped by all the wedding plans, like I was losing myself. It wasn't about you. I swear, it wasn't." Her words were a plea, but they didn't erase the images in his head, the faceless men, the betrayal. The twist came when Emily handed him her phone, open to a text thread with her best friend, Mia. "Read it," she urged. David hesitated, then scrolled through the messages. They were from the night of the Bachelorette party, a chaotic stream of texts where Emily confessed to Mia that she'd kissed 3 men at the club, not slept with them. She'd exaggerated to David, testing him, wanting to see if he'd fight for her or walk away. "I was scared you didn't really love me," she whispered. "I thought if I pushed you, I'd know." David's anger flared. How could she play with his heart like that? But beneath it, he saw her fear, her insecurity, mirroring his own. The days that followed were a storm of emotions. David grappled with the lie, the kiss, the manipulation. He thought of Clara, of her choice to see her husband's humanity. He thought of the years with Emily, the laughter, the dreams, the way she'd held him when his father died. Could he let one night, however painful, erase all that? He demanded honesty, no more games. Emily agreed, her apologies raw and endless. They went to counseling, where David learned to voice his hurt, and Emily learned to face her fears. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, is a fragile thing to rebuild. But they tried, because love, he realized, wasn't a fortress or a house of cards. It was a choice, made every day, even when it hurt. Months later, the wedding still happened, though smaller, quieter. David stood at the altar, his heart a mix of scars and hope, watching Emily walk toward him. She wasn't perfect, and neither was he. But as they said their vows, he felt the weight of Clara's story, of Emily's fear, of his own resilience. Love wasn't about never falling, it was about choosing to get back up, together. In the end, David learned that betrayal, even if exaggerated, leaves a mark. But so does forgiveness. He didn't forget the pain, but he chose not to let it define them. As they danced under the stars at their reception, Emily's hand in his, he felt a quiet strength. They'd faced the worst and come out stronger, not perfect, but real. And in that moment, that was enough.